Greetings, Earthlings! Cosmos the Alien once again invading your screens, daring to discuss his thoughts on the much-derided Metroid Other M. I suppose I'll be speaking in the third person. While doing so. As you can tell from the title, perhaps it's up here for you, but for most it'll probably be down here. I say a new fan because I'm relatively new to the series. So before I discuss the game itself, I'll discuss my history with the series, and then we'll shift locations as we usually do in these videos, and discuss the main topic of the video. So, Metroid was a series I knew about for most of my time as a fan of video gaming. Its influence was felt. It was something that could not be avoided. Metroid was something that you couldn't really, especially if you loved Smash Bros, or you loved being on the internet, or you loved anything, Metroid, it's kind of everywhere in fan circles. And it was, I think my first introduction was actually, I want to say, was either Smash Bros. Brawl, or it was the little 3DS puzzle thing, which it might have had a little, I'm going to move my head so I can edit in the photo of that. It had a Metroid Other M themed puzzle in it. I forget which one it was, but I knew of the Metroid series, but I hadn't played a game until recently. I knew Samus was a girl, and I knew she was a bounty hunter, and I knew who Ridley was, I knew he was a space dragon, and I knew it was a much darker series. I knew there was the Prime series that was a bunch of first-person shooters, and I knew there was Other M, and Samus said, "the baby," and people didn't like that game very much. But otherwise, I didn't know a whole ton. Oh yeah, and then I knew there was Mother Brain. I knew there was Mother Brain somewhere in there. But otherwise, did not know a lot. So, then Federation Force gets announced, and there's a free demo of that. So I download it, and I play Blast Ball, and I play a few sessions with a friend or two, and we all think, this is nice. And I think, maybe I'll buy the game at some point if I know anyone who also gets the game. But unlike Triforce Heroes, no one actually went and bought the game, so I never got it. And I never tried it out, despite the fact that it did look fun and whatnot, but everyone in my, friend group at the time agreed it wasn't exactly fun to play a first-person shooter on the 3DS. It wasn't exactly the sort of thing that anyone in my kind of circle of friends wanted to play either. So we moved on. I would hear about the announcement of Samus Returns and the hype surrounding that, and then I heard about the hype surrounding Dread. And I heard people loved that, and I was like, oh, that's really cool. However, it wasn't until last year that I actually went and played a Metroid game for myself, starting with and I forget the reason. I think I just was bored and I wanted to play some games. So I started with, so I kind of was thinking okay, I kind of want to go with the main story of Metroid. So I went and I played Metroid Zero Mission first, and then from there I went and played the Prime Remaster, which I had gotten previous Christmas, so I think that might have been my motivation. And then I picked up a relatively cheap used copy of Samus Returns, because nobody wanted that game used, apparently, but everybody wants Federation Force, apparently. Because I was content with the first one, but I didn't necessarily want to play the other games in the series just yet. Played Samus Returns, and I loved it, and then, I went off and I played other things. That was last year. And then this year, started playing the series again. I played Super Metroid. And then I came at another crossroads, because I told myself, oh, okay, I'll wait on the Prime series because of the fact that there are rumors that Prime 2 and 3 might get the same remastered treatment that the first game got, and if that's the case, then I'd want to play those remastered, because, goodness gracious, that remaster, it's beautiful, mwah, 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 it's beautiful, beautiful, I say, beautiful. But I came at a crossroads because I knew Other M was much derided, but on the other hand, I also knew that it was considered a core part of the story. Or at the very least, it was billed as that, and it was very much, you know, it was a part of the timeline, and I kind of wanted to play the series. Like, I wasn't going to skip out on it. I would skip out on stuff like, you know, I would skip out on titles that I couldn't play. Like, I knew the Prime series was vaguely connected. Like, playing Prime 1 gave me enough to where I could see the Prime connections in Samus Returns. No big deal. But I'm sure that would be strengthened by playing through Prime 3, and clearly Samus Returns does hint at something being done in Prime 4 that likely motivates even further the decision by the Galactic Federation to order the extermination of all the Metroids, but that'll be for later. But I was like, okay, do I go to Other M or do I go to Fusion? On the one hand, Other M on original hardware, that'll be a bit of a pain. Just gotta go buy it, and I don't want to buy it. I'm unemployed right now. I don't want to eat into my bank account. On the other hand, emulation, it's motion controls, it's pain to set up, and getting a Wiimote set up, particularly with pointer controls, that can also be a pain, and again, don't want to spend money. But, so what do? Then I learned, oh wait, there are control schemes to get that all fixed for Other M. And so I was like, then I learned, oh wait, it's considered a part of the kind of the core story of Metroid, as of the Dread, I guess, gallery or whatever that shows the mainline titles, just not Prime. So I was like, okay, I'll play it. What harm can it do? And so going into that, and coming out of it, I had some thoughts. You know, I was like, I went in trying to have an open mind, because I thought, you know what? This is a game that was hated by hardcore fans, it was hated by casual fans, it was hated by everyone, but I thought, this is the internet. This is the land of exaggerated opinions. What if it's not that bad? But also, what if it is that bad? So I went in kind of trying to temper my expectations. I was not expecting the worst game ever, but I wasn't expecting a masterpiece. I kind of went in expecting something meh. I was expecting to be maybe like bored or underwhelmed. I was not expecting Superman 64. You know, I wasn't expecting to be frustrated and angered. But I wasn't also expecting to be like bored out of my mind or in awe at the beauty of the experience before me. But you know what? Before we delve into, you know, my more in-depth thoughts, why don't we head to a bit more of an updated ship? One that's a bit more relevant to Other M specifically. Well, I'd say this is a little more relevant, isn't it? To be specific, this is supposedly the interior of the ship from Other M. I would say it looks pretty accurate, don't you think? It's very impressive. But as per usual, links to all the worlds are in the description. And hey, while you're looking at the video, give me a like and a subscribe if you don't mind. But, all that said, let's actually talk about the subject instead of rambling on about backgrounds. My own and the background behind me. But, so I went into Other M, and immediately, I will say the first thing that I have to give the game props for is, like any other Metroid game, it's really freaking pretty. It's a good-looking game. The cutscenes are very well directed. They look nice. They're Like, both the pre-rendered cutscenes look nice, and then the in-engine cutscenes look very nice. I mean, in terms of pre-rendered cutscenes, it ain't Sonic Unleashed intro nice, but nothing is that nice. Nothing will ever be that nice. Nothing in the history of video games will ever be that nice ever again. It does not matter how much photorealism is put into anything, it will never top the Sonic Unleashed intro in terms of the amount of peak absolute cinema. But they're pretty good. And I actually think the game's opening minutes are very well done, too. Showing us the ending of Super Metroid, establishing a lot of that, establishing kind of Samus's character, her thoughts, her emotions. Pretty well done, getting us used to the controls and whatnot, giving us kind of a feel for everything. I think it's very well done. The in-engine cutscenes also look very nice too. I think my only real complaint with regards to the in-engine cutscenes is the coloration of the power suit at the start. Like, once you get the Various suit, it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it's great, because then you look like Samus. But the weird piss yellow coloration of the power suit at the start, it's like, it just looks weird. It looks like the bootleg version of Samus. It doesn't look great. It looks fine in the pre-rendered stuff, but in the actual, in-engine cutscenes, and to a certain extent, and to a lesser extent in gameplay, it doesn't look great. But it makes a very strong first impression, and that is to be said. Like, holy cow, it makes a good first impression, and I was thinking, okay, maybe it's not that bad. And then kind of kept going on, and then I saw a lot of the complaints were very validated. Like, it very clearly was a game with a little too much ambition. Like, why are the controls so restricted? Why do I have to point the Wii Remote at the screen to activate missiles, which in an emulator, yes, you can remap to a button, but you're still shifting perspectives, which in an yes, that's remap to a button, but even a port or remaster, unless it was a full, kind of remake akin to Samus Returns, from the ground up, new engine, new everything. Actually, that could be really fun. Like, remaking it as a 2D Metroid title or something like that, or doing the same gameplay style, but redoing it to further emphasize gameplay elements that fans wanted, kind of refining a lot of stuff that needed refining, and then bettering up the translation. And yes, I did look into how the translation failed this game, and goodness gracious, it failed this game. But that's another matter entirely. Nintendo's not exactly known for being great on the translation side. In fact, I have many objections to their translations. Bagu is their name. 5 Zelda fans got that joke. I think the first-person perspective is fun for finding secrets and exploration and stuff, because there are some clever puzzles and there's some clever stuff here or there, but when you are doing what's it called? Darn it, I lost my train of thought for a second there. When you are in the moment-to-moment combat gameplay, there's not that smoothness that you have in a 2D title or in the Prime games, where it's just, okay, I'm shooting the blaster. Okay, I need a missile. Clearly, this enemy needs, I need a bit more firepower. Switch missile. Switch back to beam. No, you have to go into first person, and at that point, it's not that useful. And if anything, the charge beam is a lot more useful because of that. Which is kind of interesting, and I do find a lot of the gameplay decisions made interesting, but it's weird because it's a solution to a problem that they didn't need to create. Could have just been created if, they didn't need to create that problem if they just used the nunchuck. but because no one was really there to rein in Sakamoto's ambition, he was just like, we're gonna use just the Wii remote on its side. For most of the gameplay, they had to come up with this weird control scheme because the gameplay and whatnot is very fun. I just think, ooh, it would have been neat if for this action game spin-off, there had been a little more depth, because, like, think about it, this is post-Super Metroid Samus. This is Samus at her peak. This should be Samus, like, who's able to do all of this insane, cool stuff. I think on the gameplay side, you could really reflect that via just how much stuff you could do. Maybe make each of the different beams different attacks. You can combo them together or something like that. I don't know. There's a lot of different potential. Or if you want to use motion controls, I don't know, make missiles into shake the Wii remote, and then bombs shake the nunchuck, and then super missiles shake them both, or something like that. I don't know. But I think you could have made it work. But I think the gameplay is perfectly fine in terms of stuff like combat and whatnot. Like, the bosses are really fun. They're action-packed. They're intense. They're incredibly satisfying to defeat. Sometimes they're a little too easy, I think. But, like, the Ridley fight? Goodness, the Ridley fight. That's intense. I think the final encounter's a little much, because you go from encounters where you're fighting all these cool, like, different enemies to suddenly there's a bunch of these bug things, and it's like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? Oh, I'm supposed to hit the NPC in the background, and there's nothing indicating that I'm supposed to hit that, and the targeting system won't even target that NPC in the background, and it's a pain in the butt to try and hit that character. And good luck surviving. But the idea is cool. I mean, one boss that I don't like doesn't make a bad game in terms of the boss fights, and let's be real, most games don't exactly have the best final bosses. I mean, Metroid Prime's endgame isn't exactly beloved either. Or does everyone love collecting the Chozo artifacts? I mean, it's not as bad as the original Wind Waker's fetch quest, but I mean, could have been that bad. That aside, I do see why a lot of people don't like the gameplay. Like, it's so very different, and it wasn't billed as a spin-off, it was billed as the next chapter, filling in this huge gap of story, exploring Samus's character. And then the gameplay was so radically different, and people didn't like it. So, when you're not really doing a lot of that exploration and whatnot, you're not really doing a lot great. And the music is not that. It's not there. I'm sorry, it's not there. Especially when, from the perspective of me, who's going in timeline order, I just got off the heels of Super Metroid. Which, I mean, that's a classic for a reason. It's just, I mean, I'm not editing at the time. Like, I do recording first and then editing. But I am presumably using mostly Super Metroid music because of how this game ties into Super Metroid. And then probably some Metroid Samus Returns music as well, because of the fact that I'm also going to be talking about Metroid 2, which segues perfectly into my discussion of the real thing that people didn't like about this, which was the story. And I kind of 50-50 agree. I think there were some good ideas, they just weren't executed well. Yes, there was the translation, but even when translated well, I don't necessarily think that they really capitalized on a lot of what could have been done. Because on the one hand, exploring Samus's days working for the Federation military and her relationship with her former CO, Adam, and her kind of feelings regarding, maturing from being this helpless kid who couldn't do anything to stop her, family from being murdered by the space pirates, into being the mature, independent adult we see her in the series. That would have been cool for a pre-Metroid 1 title, or even something during Zero Mission. I'm surprised this story was not told during Zero Mission. I'm surprised a lot of those elements weren't put into Zero Mission, but maybe they thought it wouldn't work. Maybe Sakamoto was planning out elements of Other M's story and at the time, or was thinking about them in the back of his head and was like, I want to put them in this new title, but that would deviate too much from the original game, so I won't put them in there too much. So you kind of... So I get that. But no matter what, I do think it's weird that that it doesn't take place pre-Metroid 1 or even just right after Metroid 1. Like circa the Prime games, Like younger, inexperienced Samus, or using elements of the story that could potentially that could potentially further emphasize elements of Samus' character. Like, I think certain story beats almost feel like they're out of order. Like, with the Ridley scene that people hate, I think there's something that could have been done. Like, okay, by this point, you just count the 2D games, she's killed Ridley twice. You count Samus Returns, we got a third time. You count the Prime games, there's 2 more times on top of that. Samus Returns wasn't out at the time, so there were 4 times in total in canon, and yes, Sakamoto had gone on record at the time and said the Prime games were canon. And yes, in Prime 1 wasn't fatal, Prime 3, to my knowledge, wasn't fatal, but the first Metroid, it was very near fatal, and Super Metroid, it was confirmed to be fatal. Like, Ridley was fatally wounded and killed for good. So, dead. But I think one thing that could have really made it work is if Anthony, my boy, my man, who I have a lot to say about, had been killed or presumed dead before the panic attack as opposed to after it. Because then it's, oh my goodness, it's just like when I was a kid. He's taken someone else from me. Or if there was something that made it, or there's something that draws parallels between her blaming him for the baby Metroid's death, despite the fact that it's Mother Brain that killed the baby Metroid. I don't know, you can find some way of justifying it in the narrative. I feel like the narrative does not necessarily make it make sense, but I do think killing off Anthony or killing off Adam because he says, go after Ridley, and then there's no follow-up boss fight. But I think maybe if Adam had died, and then we went after Ridley, and then there was and then maybe then the panic attack happens, and then Anthony dying again. Like, we get Samus in this blind rage going, and fighting, Ridley, and there's this, like, undertone of anger, and her just being like, why do you have to take all the people I love away from me? And there's this just undercurrent of just her unleashing all this anger that she's been holding in that we never saw in the 2D games because Super Metroid never showed it, the original game never showed it, Zero Mission never showed it, and Prime never showed it. But you'd imagine she'd have it because Fusion showed that Ridley was there in the attack that led to her parents being killed, and very clearly, like, I don't think it's ever been explicitly stated in the games per se, and the manga that tied into Zero Mission is considered non-canon, but either way, Ridley had a hand in her parents' death and her being adopted by the Chozo. So it's like, there's that undercurrent of like, you take away all the people I love, why must you do this? there's gotta be something in there, right? But either way, I feel like either, there could have been either A, this neat origin story exploring her, time in the Federation military, her feelings about going independent from them, and her feelings of becoming mature over time as she moves away from Adam, who she sees as a father figure. And really should have had the Chozo in there, because I feel like they weren't in there because of the Super Metroid elements, because there was just so much in there, and there was way too much in there, because I think then the murder mystery could have been done more justice. And then I think if Adam's death was in there, I think then him being the name of the AI all the way in Fusion would have had a bit more impact, because then his death is this distant memory. And it's like, oh, man, I remember this CO of mine who sacrificed himself for me way back when I was a new bounty hunter. Like, then, for a lot of fans, it goes from, it goes from just this thing she mentions as a distant memory to this thing she mentions, and we know it has some emotional weight because it's a part of this character arc for her at the start of her story, basically, as far as we, the player, see it. On the other hand, I do think there's something to be said about exploring the emotional consequences of Super Metroid. Because think about it, this comes immediately after Metroid 2, where following the Galactic Federation failing to do so themselves, they hire Samus to commit genocide. They ask her to be the Ridley in this situation, to wipe out everyone, to wipe out every single Metroid on the planet. And yes, we know they were created as a bioweapon now, but Samus didn't know that. She would not learn this until Fusion. Other M Samus does not know this. Super Metroid Samus does not know this. Metroid 2 / Samus Returns Samus does not know this. But, we the player, having played Fusion, we know this. But that's another matter entirely. And obviously the Galactic Federation doesn't know this. So she goes and she does this job, and she's about to see, the baby Metroid. And the baby Metroid, it imprints on her as her mother, and she, at least the way I'm reading into it, the way I read into it, she sees it, and she likely has this moment of realization, is like, oh, I am like the space pirates were to me. I am doing to this child what the space pirates did to me. I need to spare this creature, or I will be worse than them because I got to live. This creature deserves life. Or something else. You could interpret it another way, but either way, she feels compassion for the thing that imprints on her as its mother. And so, she takes it to the Ceres space station, and she takes it to scientists there and has them research it for potential positive uses for galactic society. So we see through that, okay, we see compassion, we see, kindness, we see that through these actions that she's a very, kind, compassionate, positive, heroic figure. So I think exploring Samus's character further has some merit, exploring perhaps the reasoning why, exploring maybe some of the trauma, because immediately after she does this, like Super Metroid shows, it's not too long after she does this, Ridley breaks in, kills all the scientists in that station, and then kidnaps the baby Metroid and sets the station to self-destruct. She then has to go into the back onto her the planet she grew up on alongside the Chozo, the not SR388, that's the home planet of the Metroids, Zebes, and fight against the space pirates again. She learns that they've been pooling together their resources and are trying to make a comeback using the baby Metroid. And what do you know? they're big, they're back, they're bigger, they're better than ever. I mean, in canon, we know that she genuinely crippled them in the first game and throughout the Prime series. Like, the first game was them at their peak, and everything afterwards was just a decline for them. And Super Metroid was a desperate attempt for a comeback, but their operation there was still bigger than the one we saw in the first game. So, no matter what, it's a lot more intense. And so she goes there, and she sees some pretty messed up stuff. She ends up killing Ridley, and she ends up seeing that the baby Metroid had been experimented on, turned into the titular Super Metroid. And she ends up having to fight Mother Brain again, and who knows if she's got feelings against Mother Brain or towards Mother Brain, or that could have been worth exploring. The final game, despite having a clone of Mother Brain, does not explore that. And then the baby Metroid dies, saving her life from Mother Brain, and after she kills Mother Brain, the planet she grew up on is destroyed entirely. Whether or not you save the animals. So basically, there may or may not have been survivors. Hopefully you save the animals. I did. It led to me dying another time on my first attempt because of the fact that I tried to save the animals and then died after saving them, and then I had to do it better the second time around in the escape sequence, but that's another thing. But that's the thing, is that's a lot that happens all at once. Metroid 2, then Super Metroid, a lot of stuff happens in those games. And although Samus is quiet all throughout, I mean, there's a bit of narration at the start of Super, you gotta imagine there's a lot going on up there. There's a lot that had to have happened in here as well. A lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts, a lot of emotions. So, exploring the emotional consequences of those games, I think is worthwhile. Exploring what that reveals about Samus as a character, the fact that she destroyed her home planet, the fact that she was able to destroy the space pirates, the fact that she went and killed Mother Brain after the baby Metroid. Like, what does it reveal about her character that she committed genocide and yet spared this one baby Metroid? Doing that kind of character study, I think, would be very worthwhile. Other M's just not interested in doing that specific character study. It's interested in doing another one that's more fitting of something closer to an origin story, but at the same time it wants to be set after Super Metroid and integrate elements of it. It's a bloated story that does justice to none of its elements, because it also wants to have Adam because he's relevant to Fusion, and it also wants to have a bunch of red shirts with one exception. And actually, that's another thing. A lot of people say that, oh, well, it's not exactly a very isolating game because there are other characters. Thing is, I think I have not played past Other M in the timeline. Like, I listed out the games I've played in this series. So I know Prime 3 has other characters, I know Fusion has the AI Adam, and I think Dread has other characters, I'm not sure. I believe Prime 2 also has other characters. Either way, I know that I think there's merit in the idea of a Metroid game that has other characters, especially because Metroid has always borrowed from horror. And a classic horror trope is, people getting picked off one by one, and from the moment you meet the other, the members of the Galactic Federation squad that arrives at the bottle ship, it is made very, very clear that they are red shirts through and through. Their characterization is paper thin. With two exceptions, being Adam, because he's a little lore relevant, and the second being my man, my boy, Anthony. He is so incredibly likable, it's jarring. Like, genuinely, this is a character I want to see in a future installment. Put this man in whatever follow-up Dread gets. Put him in Metroid 6. Why is he so likable? Who, was there a different writer on this character? And his voice actor is also genuinely good in the English version. Actually, the voice acting is pretty serviceable. And the casting is, I think, pretty good. I think it's just down to poor direction, but I think the casting is really good. I think if they were just given better direction, then we would have had much better voice acting throughout. So I wouldn't necessarily mind, say, this voice of Samus returning in a future title, or say if they brought back Anthony, just them getting the same guy. I'm just saying. I'd remember him. But I don't think necessarily there's anything wrong with having other characters to interact with, especially if they're connected to Samus's past, because we can get insight via, say, talking to them. You know, you could have comm chatter, or you could have conversations with them on the side, or you could have small bits of characterization, or you could have bits where maybe they make you, where their motivations are genuinely in question, where maybe they're the main threat. And you question, could they do harm to Samus? Like maybe they have some way of incapacitating Samus's armor. You know, maybe the whole deleter subplot had been in... I think if it had been introduced a lot earlier, I think it would have been a lot better, because then it's a mystery. There's a bit of... I don't know. There could have been something. Something there. But one thing that disappoints me is you never get to talk to you never get to talk to any of the Federation members. The terrible voice crack, goodness. You never get to talk to any of the Federation members on the side whenever you're walking near them. You never get to have little side interactions, like Adam only reaches out to you to say, do this, do that. You're authorized to use this. Hey, use this in this situation. Use this in that situation. Blah, 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 blah. It's all very bog standard. There's very little banter. Except for best character, he's the best. That's why he's the best. Because there's actual personality. That's why it's clear that he's the only one that won't die. And it's why I think he'd be great showing up in another Metroid title, because it's clear him and Samus leave the story off on good terms. And again, I think there's still potential. Just saying, like, it's a very common thing in games. Like, oh, you have the story necessary discussion, like, you know, conversation or whatever, and then afterwards, you hit the A or circle or whatever button, and then you're talking again. Okay, cool. And there's the side conversation could have him being like, oh, this reminds me of such and such mission, or, oh man, you've changed a lot since the last time we met, kind of almost acknowledging, you know, or maybe he tells like a really bad dad joke or something. I don't know. There's a lot there. I think there's a reason why I've seen more fan art of like him and Samus being besties instead of like Adam and Samus like being like comrades in battle or something like that. Like I've seen more fan content or memes even with best character instead of the character the story was meant to prop up and develop, because he's sadly not developed as much as he should be, because even despite him being given a distinct personality, it's still kind of clear he's a red shirt, even if he really shouldn't be. He should be fleshed out enough that when he dies, it's tragic. And there's dramatic irony in that we, the audience, know that because of fusion, he will die. But Samus and the other characters, they don't know that. But, alas, 'twas not the case. Heck, it would have been neat if they had gone the origin story route, and then a sequel could have been a follow-up taking place during Super Metroid, or heck, it would have been neat if Adam was not in the squad, and Adam's death had, again, taken place pre-Metroid 1. And this squad is all people Samus knew while working under Adam. And instead of it being Adam's brother that died, it was Adam himself that died. And Adam's brother is the CEO of this squad. maybe he holds some resentment towards Samus, and as a result, there's tension there. I could see some interesting character drama. Again, you're gonna focus on the story, focus on the story. You're gonna build this as focusing on the story and the characterization, and then the story isn't really as present as a lot of people claim it is in the game. That's the first big problem. The second big problem, story is not as fleshed out, and it doesn't do as much with its premise or with any of the ideas it promises to execute. Like, genuinely, I'm half tempted to go open a Google Doc and start writing a frickin' fanfiction and post it on Archive of Our Own, purely because of how much wasted potential there is in this game. But, number one, I don't think I got the skill for that, nor do I think I've got enough knowledge of the Metroid series just yet. I want to finish Fusion and Dread, and then I'll probably discuss, my thoughts on the kind of the mainline series. And then two, I'd want to finish the Prime series after that. And by that point, by the time I get to the end of Dread, by the time I finish Metroid Dread, I bet you Metroid Prime 4 will be out. And then by the time I get to Metroid Prime 4, I bet you they'll release the follow-up to Dread. Let's be real. Let's be real here. Let's be real. But that's enough out of me. That's all I got to say on the subject. So, want to thank you all for joining me. Want to ask you all to, for the first time in any one of these videos, I want to ask you all to like and subscribe. But that's enough out of me. I don't know if I'll keep that as a consistent part of my outro. I don't really like saying it, personally. This is Cosmos the Alien, blasting off.